And we are live. Welcome, my dear. How was your weekend?
It was interesting for being a holiday weekend. How was yours?
It was good. We really didn't do much. I went and spent some time with my daughter, ran some errands, enjoyed Easter with my mom yesterday. But yeah, it really didn't do much. Meal prep and work today. So that's pretty much summarizes my weekend.
Yeah,
You had
we
some
went.
storms.
We did. We went to some friends about an hour and a half away, and I get Saturday night. I get this text from the people that run the RV park saying there's a tornado about 3 miles from here, and it was like, oh, okay. Well, we're an hour and a half away, so nothing we can do. I mean, they actually had people like in the community bathrooms and stuff. Um, Nothing happened. And then that was at like, I don't know, 8:30, 9 o'clock. And then at 4:30, she texted me in the morning, Sunday morning, and said that they had either a hurricane or straight line winds or something that came in, but it shook her travel trailer pretty heavy. They lost part of the roof on the office, and it damaged three of the travel trailers out here. So ours was fine, but I had her. She has a key. She came in and checked everything. And then when my husband woke up, we were supposed to go to church and then out to eat at a Brazilian restaurant with our friends. And my husband and I made the decision that we need to get back to see basically what really happened, what damage there was, and or we had to go check our property as well because we have a building on the property. And there was definitely some flash flooding. We had a bunch of stone brought in for our driveway. We lost easily over half a load over our creek area. But the building was okay. Everything else was okay. But we seen there was a lot of water that just rushed through. So it was kind of crazy. Weird weekend. I ended up literally for Easter lunch, I had Portillo's hot dog.
Hey, sometimes in those situations, you can be, 100%, which kind of ties into what we were going to talk about tonight. You can be 100%, right? And
Yeah,
and doing everything perfectly, but then there's these times where you may have to end up and grab the hot dog, right?
right,
But that's okay, right? Being able to
right.
have
And
some of this flexibility.
well, and that's it. I mean, it was the hot. I didn't get the bun, right? I got the onion, the relish, the had onion relish, mustard, and it came with a pickle. It's a Chicago type dog. If anybody knows anything about Chicago dogs, it was a Chicago dog minus the bun, and that's what I had. So, I knew I was going to be okay, um, but there was still an element of I knew what I could order, and that's being able to know and plan ahead as well. I can go into most any restaurant and figure out something to order um, if I have to.
Hmm.
And I know you're the same way.
Yep. And that's one of the biggest things that I work with clients on because that's a big stress for them, right?
Mhm.
One, in people that are very strict with tracking macros and tracking all of that, they're like, it's almost a sense of fear.
Mhm.
And then we're constantly in this, scared or even for some an eating disorder state because that is also part of it. When you end up and fear food or you hesitate to order what I mean, if you go and you get a steak or you go and get salmon and a grilled veggie or a side salad, um, it shouldn't be looked at as a cheat meal.
Right.
And that's where some people end up and look at it as it's a cheat meal. And so then they, I must end up and fast, or, oh, I blew it, so I'm done. And then you complete, binge cycle. And that is an eating disorder where when I think of, even like food freedom or freedom in the journey is I can go out to eat or I can make, not so optimal choices, but I stay right on track, right? I end up and I get right back in the game. It's a lifestyle. It's not, doing it perfect for 90 days or, there's several different challenges out there that are like 60 days, 75 days, 90 days. And some of them you have to start over, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And that in to me is just wrong because that again sets up that mindset of I screwed up or I did something wrong. I have to start again. And it just sets up this whole diet mentality when in reality, we're looking at the lifestyle. We're looking at how can I end up and do this long term. And if you're in that wishy-washy or that back and forth, mindset, you're not going to end up and be able to do it. You're going to look always for that next, quick thing and you're going to chase your tail.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
hard for some.
Well, I mean, and that, yeah. And so again, and there was a time where I would have went into Portillo's, which is a Chicago-based restaurant, and they've expanded all over the country. That I would not have had the hot dog because I would not have known what the ingredients were in the hot dog. It's because I was so militant about right my meat. If it was cured with any type of sugar, the curing process we're talking about, I absolutely wouldn't even buy it. So kind of come a long way and being able to you know prioritize what I can eat and we were you know we didn't really have time to stop and get some. Plus it was Easter, like half of nothing was open. So
Mhm.
so there was that other element. So yeah, it was just yeah, I think too many people are um very dogmatic
Mhm.
about, well, we get so many questions on what can I eat, right?
Yeah. And there's a lot of people out there that look at it as disciplined.
Yes.
Oh, I'm just being disciplined. I'm just, that's kind of what the world ends up and calls it is being disciplined or being strict,
Right.
right? They don't necessarily look at it for what it is, and that's unknowingly crossing that line into again the disordered eating world.
Yeah, I was
Go
going
ahead.
to say, don't you think that social media versus reality is really doing a disservice?
Mhm. Yep. Yep. There's a lot of people that social media wise also that are pushing fasting. And
Yeah.
so you get these people that are, white knuckling it all day. They're not eating, they're not nourishing their body. They, are restricting and then they'll either binge at night and have, a lot of issues which I mean that disrupts your whole,
Yeah.
sleep cycle, that disrupts your hormones. You'll have those people that white knuckle their way through fast and then open it up to eating on their eating day. And again, they open that window and then it's like gate open, right? They they completely derail. So it's not just at night and not eating enough through the day. They'll end up and they'll fast. And then when they open even like an extended fast, it can lead to problems. Or they're constantly thinking about, you know, a a cheat day or, going out to eat and they're almost creating this obsessiveness over every bite. And again, I originally started talking about the macro people. Um I was one of them. I would end up and count macros. I would weigh food. I would count, the grams, right? Making sure that I was hitting the proper ratios of my macros because I wanted to see that the original topic of tonight's meeting was I wanted to see that scale move. Putting
Right.
too much, emphasis on that scale and trying to control the obsession throughout the day or throughout the week so that you end up and you see that certain number instead of, and then, if I didn't, then it was like a spiral, right?
Right.
um yes, I did get to the point where numbers were just numbers over the last, several years. But when I first started, it was a mind game playing with numbers. And like I said, now of course I look at it as data for what it is, because I realize that, showing up for myself, not for what numbers I was getting.
Yeah.
It's hard for
Well,
some.
I mean, I have started weighing myself every week, every Friday morning since January 3rd of this year. And the last 2 weeks I've gained 3 pounds in the last 2 weeks. And a lot of people probably would quit, or they would go, oh my gosh, I got to change something. Like this isn't working. And what that scale isn't telling me is how much hydration, what's my muscle mass, what about hormone fluctuations, digestion. Uh, it's not showing the true picture. And yes, I make comments about it, but the truth is I didn't change up anything. I'm still staying the course, even though I'm up 3 pounds in the last 2 weeks. Overall, I'm down quite a bit, but it's understanding that it sleep is a factor when it comes to weighing. Um, Endurance. I've been out on the property doing more physical activity. Am I carrying some inflammation? Is it some muscle mass that I'm starting to build? I don't know, because again, all I see is the number on the scale.
Yep. And that is a big factor there. You're right. It doesn't tell the whole story. And even someone like myself, I have one of the bioimpedance scales, right? So when I step on it, it does end up and tell me gauges, right? How standing on something ends up engages it. Obviously, the only true and accurate is doing like a DEXA scan or a bod pod or something along those lines that is going to give you the true fat mass or body fat percentage and the lean muscle mass. But sure, I end up and I have one. But if you just have a standard scale, it's just telling you your gravity. Like you said, it doesn't tell you the inflammation. And I remember us talking last Thursday, and I said,
Mhm.
what are you going to end up and do if, right? Um, and that is part of it. Like you said, muscle is denser than fat. So you may be shrinking, but pound for a pound, right?
Right.
And so the scale may not move, body composition may be changing. That's why we end up when we talk about photos. That's why we end up when we talk about all these other things of how is your mood, how is your stress, how is, um how's your clothes fitting, all of this goes into it. How's your energy, how's your bloating? I can't tell you how many times I've heard someone say I'm sleeping better, I have more energy, my bloating is gone, but I'm not losing weight. And what do I need to end up and change? Nothing. There is nothing
Right.
to change. The one thing that I will say is watch your cycle,
Mhm.
because for me, usually around, and I can see it, right? I've been tracking diligently with one of the apps that I use, or not apps, but spreadsheets that I have, because again, I like the numbers. And I can see usually about the 12th to the 16th, it kind of comes up, but then it will end up and go down. And that's just a normal rotation in my, cycle. Overall, yes, still down, but I'll end up and I'll gain, and it's only, like you said, a pound to 2 pounds, and then it starts to come back down, and then I will
Mhm.
end up and go up, 2.3 pounds, and then it'll end up and come back down, you know.
Yeah.
So there's there's that. Like I said, just kind of watch that and track it as far as, how you are progressing. Um, because even though, you're a woman in your 50s, I had a hysterectomy 15 years ago. So basically, we're both menopausal. Um, that happens,
Right.
even if you don't have a cycle or you're not cycling. Um, and for me, I can tell you it most of the time it aligns somewhere between the 12th and 16th, which does not correlate with my feast week. My weight gain isn't always necessarily following my feast week. Because once a month I end up and I follow the moon and I have my feast. So that can also be part of it. If you're someone that is restricting and under eating, you can be
Mm,
gaining weight.
mhm.
So that's people tend to, kind of going back into the eating disorder things with the whole scale side of things, they'll see that weight gain and then they'll try to restrict, or they'll end up and try to do more fasting, or it's always let's do more, let's go, harder about this. And sometimes that's not the case.
Yeah,
Sometimes you need to really check in and think, am I eating enough?
right.
Is my body safe? Or am I constantly in, fight and flight? You brought up the fact of sleep and recovery. I get so passionate about the recovery side because that's one of the things that helped my thyroid. I had someone in a Facebook group earlier today tell me that I made the bold statement when I said I reversed my The question was, can you reverse Hashimoto's? And I said, I reversed mine without pills or without meds and supplements. And I got told that was bold. Maybe, but I did it. How did I do it? By everything that we're talking about. Making sure, I was eating enough, making sure that I was getting the recovery side of things, staying hydrated, moving the body properly, not over moving, so it's all about this delicate balance.
Yeah.
But it's not about looking at that scale or taking the measurements and jump and ship.
Well, and taking the photos, right? I mean, how often that I don't even post this on social media, but I'll send you pictures of like, oh, look at me a month ago and today, or look at, and you can visibly see it, which is funny. That's a whole nother topic of conversation. I see it in the picture, but I still think the mind still thinks I'm that bigger person. But I have body dysmorphia for sure. But I still take the pictures. I still compare them. Um, and I I take the measurements. So one of the things I designed, what was it, 2 years ago, my macro and healing journal, and in that, and which is available to download, I have a sheet with measurements, a person's body, and you can write that. I printed that page out, what, about 6 weeks ago, I think it's been
Mhm.
now. And I took my measurements. I'm due to take them again to see what's going on, because again, I can feel my clothes are fitting different, even though that scale isn't reflecting how the clothes are feeling on my body. So I know it's time to take measurements too. Um, and people, like you said, they don't look at uh, the fact that muscle, right, takes up less room than fat does. Um,
Mhm.
Google do a Google search on what 1 pound of fat looks like versus 1 pound of muscle, and the volume is so much different. Um, how's your body functioning? How's your hunger cues? How's your hormone balance? Um, how's your sleep? Like you said, there's a bunch of additional things that you can do than literally stepping on that scale. And I see people doing it daily.
Mhm.
And I'm like, "Oh my goodness, how do you even," um, because it becomes an emotional burden, when you are so obsessed to step on the scale. I remember one time, and I think you know the person too. She said she weighed herself daily, and she had a problem with she couldn't not weigh herself daily. Do you remember who I'm talking about?
Yeah. It
Yeah.
it it again, it was in that obsession side of things, right?
Mhm.
Because they ended up and they were putting too much identity in that, right? They were
Yeah.
putting that was their metric, right? That was what they
Yeah.
were tying that emotional side. And a lot of times, yes, there is the mental component, there is the emotional component in regards of our journey. We talk about that all the time. I had
Yeah.
I had just posted in the chat the healing journal, but you also had the affirmations because sometimes
Yes.
when we don't work on the mentality side of our journey,
Yeah.
we end up we stay, right? So we never get out of our habits if we don't shift that identity. And women especially, we end up when we tie it to that. We don't trust ourselves, we don't trust our body. And so we're reliant on the outcome of what we're being told by the scale. And
Right.
that's where zoom out, right? We got to get out of that mindset. We got to end up and daily fluctuations. I mean, those are inevitable. They're gonna end up and happen. Maybe you drink more water. Maybe you have a little bit of inflammation going. Maybe, cyclically, seasonally. I mean, there's so many components as far as what can end up and trigger that fluctuation.
Mhm.
And it doesn't mean to jump ship. It doesn't mean to, you know, completely do a 180 on what you're doing. Continue on. Focus on other things. And that's what you were just listing, right? The non-scale victories, and put up a mindset board. I told you, right?
Yeah, you did. Mhm.
With those pictures, I said, because body dysmorphia is a real thing, I said, put those pictures up. And it's not the, fake it till you make it mentality, but
Mhm.
it's a tie to that subconscious, right? When you are seeing those pictures or you're seeing the notes or you're seeing that input, it's the body's way of looking at the bigger picture. We are so in our day-to-day rhythm or day-to-day cycles
Yeah.
that we end up when we forget that bigger picture.
Right.
And that's hard, because we do always see ourselves, daily in the mirror, right? Whether we're combing our hair or what we're doing. And I think that's also where, they were kind of stepping on the scale because they put too much into that.
Yeah.
Um, but that
Well,
was
that was
kind of
their
their own,
identity,
yeah.
and it became a very much an emotional burden to them. And then it was causing a lot of anxiety. Well, that in itself, it's going to cause, right, uh, more of a problem, that scale obsession, um, and the prioritizing the mental and the emotional well-being, like you just said, is far more important. I mean, at one point, how long ago was it? You pulled all the scales out of your house.
I did,
You
which
did.
there was a multitude of reasons why I ended up and I did that.
Right.
But yeah, it was that reset reboot. And sometimes we have to do that. We have to reset, reboot,
Yep.
um, refocus, right? Sometimes
Yep.
just the whole reframing of why are you so frustrated? Why are you, putting so much emphasis and identity into this? And
Yeah.
that's where again, really working on the mental side. What is my body doing still holding on to this, and why?
Right.
Why how can I create that safety to my so my body releases, because
Right.
it'll stall. You can end up and actually create a stall by not focusing on the sleep, not focusing on the safety side. The body has to feel safe. It
Yeah.
will not end up and drop the fat if you're constantly in this sympathetic, fight, flight, unregulated side
Right.
of things. And that's where, we talk about the cortisol, we talk about the leptin and all the other circadian driven hormones. really, if you're highly stressed and the body, is sensing that, and I've talked to clients and they've said, "Well, I'm not stressed."
I've said that,
But you are, you know?
right?
I'm
Yeah.
like, "Really? Let's dig into this." Are
Mhm.
you doing and all the things? Are you stressed? Are you working on? And, yeah, I'll throw you out there. You're one that will tell me, I'm not stressed. I don't have, a stress the project that you were on at the time, you're like, it's not stressful. I'm not stressed. But what happens when you ended up and did breath work? What happens when you did the yoga?
Mhm.
You
Oh, yeah,
know, and the
yeah,
blood sugar started to go down. I'm like,
yeah,
really? You're
yeah.
not?
I'm not. I'm not, and I think it went down one time, one session, it was like 27 points and my blood sugar went down. Yeah, but I'm not stressed, right?
Oh,
But yeah, and that's where practicing even yoga or breathing techniques, breath work, things like that, tapping,
yeah,
it all plays into it. But and actually, I'm thinking here, Becky, I'm thinking that our B&C community may want to weigh in on this along with our audience. But let's talk about maybe a challenge with everybody. What if everyone detaches from the scale for a month and focus on maybe mindset habits and just a different mindset shift? Um, what kind of a challenge would that be for someone? How would you put it in the chat? Like, could you even do uh, ditch the scale for a month?
yeah.
Um, right? And again, like I said earlier, that's social media versus reality and how you're seeing things online, health and fitness, and your influencers, uh, how their bodies are, how their body images are. Look, I can take a picture of myself, you know, at a different angle and see something different. Um, it's all in perspective as well. Um, are we racing to a number or are we wanting to see a lifelong journey to have wellness? You have to ask yourself these really important questions, especially when you're obsessed with a scale um, that is giving you that validation or not. I don't know. How can you celebrate wins without relying on a measurement tool?
And that's where I always speak about my non-negotiables, right?
Right.
Because I anchor more in my ritual over the result. So, am I getting my breakfast? And now that I've started with the meal prep side of things, am I getting my breakfast with sunrise? Am I getting my grounding walk? Am I getting my hydration in during the day? I'm anchoring in this, not the result. Yes, I end up and I still, have been weighing because that's what people want to end up and see, right? Um,
Well, but you're doing that as a coach, a health coach,
yeah.
because if you weren't doing that, you would not be measuring.
No, I wouldn't.
Mm-mm.
It is solely because, I get that a lot in regards of what would you change differently to get, this result, or what would you end up and change? Um, and the answer is nothing, because what I do allows me, to continue the lifestyle. I'm a healthy body fat percentage. I'm right there in, standard normal range. I don't need to be single digits. I'm not, chasing any um body composition, um hell, what are they called? The bikini competitions, Um I could care less. I'm not going to end up and go up on stage and, show off my mm-mm. I'm good. It took me how long? A week and a half to post the picture out there that I do have posted out there in regards of, before
Yeah.
and current. Because I'm like, mm. um, but again, I did it because I want people to realize we have to also validate what is health.
Yeah.
And that's where people are chasing a number on a scale because, oh, I weighed this in high school, but they
Yeah,
weren't necessarily healthy.
yeah,
They
yeah,
may end up and been skinny in high school,
yeah,
but
yeah.
they also looked, very rail thin and not healthy,
Well, it's funny
sickly.
you say that because when I was 16 and I got my driver's license, I did not lie about my weight. I was 115 pounds, right? And what's funny is if I look up what my ideal body weight is supposed to be, I'm a 56-year-old woman. And I think the lowest says 117 pounds. And I'm thinking, if I chase that number, could you imagine
Mhm.
as a woman, a menopausal grandmother? I mean, let's just go there. Like 117 pounds. I would look, and I told you, you have my permission to beat me senseless
Right.
and to beat the sense back into me. And it's funny because we watch people on social media that are so rail thin. I mean, there was one picture that you had put a while back on social media that had a picture of someone's arm
Mhm.
and then a picture of somebody else's arm. And the question you asked is what's the difference
Mhm.
between the two? And it was like looking at skin over the bones of the
Bones.
arm. That's
Mhm.
that's what it looked like to me. And tell them what the difference was.
The extremes on dietary dogma.
Yeah.
They were the opposite extremes of read into that as you will, but they were the opposite extremes of the dietary dogma camps out there.
Yeah.
So one was very extreme in one direction, and the other was the opposite. And they looked very similar. I had several people that, would end up and comment to that story and tell me that the only difference was a tan. And I said, no, it's actually two different people, but they looked very similar. And that to me, that's not healthy. Right. When I end up and I think of health, it's being able to lift things, have the muscle mass, have that longevity aspect of what health is. And that's why, I go to my dungeon. I end up and I go for my weighted walk. Right now, things are, nice out. Well, it was chilly this morning. It was 31 degrees still, but
Ooh.
we had a frost advisory in Nebraska. Um, but, when I think of health, it's how can I end up and I be a functioning, healthy individual, able to move, able to get up and down, absent of, my diabetes, Hashimoto's, cardiac issues. To me, that's what health is building this resilience to life, right? Not
Yeah.
having the digestive issues that I had. There's so much of that I ended up and had that now being able to live free of that, not be
Yeah.
on medicine, not be on supplements. That's why I get so passionate about it. A lot
Yeah.
of people end up and, push back to my no pills, no supplements, pills, pokes, potions, and etc.
Yeah.
When we live in sync, we don't need it.
Right. Well, and like I said, Saturday night we went out to eat with our friends that we went to visit, and we went to a Mexican restaurant. And you know what I had? I had a taco salad without the shell.
Mhm.
And for my dressing, it was guacamole. And it was good. Like I had no problems eating that. It was the ground beef, and I told them no cheese on it and no shell. And she said, "What kind of dressing?" And I said, "No dressing." And the one lady sitting next to me, she kind of looked at me. She said, "Oh, I can't eat like that." And she proceeded to tell me how she eats her emotions. And it's funny how people feel like they need to justify
Mhm.
when you're eating a certain way. It kind of cracks me up. But she went on to tell me all about how she couldn't um, justify, how she couldn't, oh, and I love to bake, and then I eat what I bake, and blah blah blah. And how did you get started? And I said, how did I get started? I took everything out of my house. I cleaned house. I cleaned the pantry. I cleaned the refrigerator, the freezer. I cleaned it out and it got out of the house. And she says, well, I hope you gave it away. And I said, no, I threw it out. See, I'm not going to go give somebody else the poison that I'm trying to remove from my body. And it was like, I know I didn't. Um, I don't know if you remember when I did that in a number of
Mm.
years when I first
Yeah.
started. Yeah. Um, but it was, and I said, she says, oh, well, what did your husband do? And I said, nothing. Like, if you want your food, then you need to get your food, but you need to keep it out of my pantry.
Yep.
Like, you need to put it somewhere else. And it's amazing what you can do when you eliminate the junk that's just sitting in your pantry. Things like that. But it was cute. She was justifying why she's gained weight and why she's had some. She had a surgery on her foot. She's about to have knee replacement surgery. And what she doesn't realize is if she changes her diet, she can stop the cycle she's on. But what I also heard was she's not ready.
Yep. Yep.
So,
And that's just it. You can teach them all you want, but you can't end
mhm.
up and lead the horse. You can lead the horse to water, but you can't make it drink, right?
Yeah,
Getting back to this health, you're right. It doesn't take perfection. It doesn't take,
no,
extremes for many people. Simply just eating the ingredients, right?
yeah,
Instead of buying the processed foods that has the ingredients, buy the squash, buy the meat,
right,
buy the, lettuce or whatever the case may be. Um, and it doesn't have to be, again, I I had someone ask me this weekend because they were confused in regards of how to get started, how to
yeah,
I wish I had the question in front of me. Basically, it was a case of they were at the grocery store and it was like they were froze. They didn't
mhm,
know how to eat to nourish their body. And so I went through when I just did this, right? Friday night because I knew I was going grocery shopping Saturday. I end up and what is my protein, right?
yep,
I make sure that I prioritize that protein first. So, yes, we have beef in the freezer, but if I only ate beef, I would get tired of beef. So, I like a variety for my protein. Um Especially now that I'm in spring, like you said, the taco salad. I love
mhm,
chicken on a salad. I love,
mhm,
so there's that, but I end up and I look at protein first.
yep,
Make sure, what am I gonna end up and eat? What do I have left over, right? That's the other thing, because if you're on a budget, what do you have in your fridge already? What do you have in
right,
your, pantry already? And I had a couple technically I had like 4 burgers in there, that I had just made, and so that went into my meal prep. I'm like, "Okay, so that took, a couple meals out because again, this is my feast week." So, um, and then I look at what non-starchy vegetable carbs do I end up and eat in there. Now, I also end up and do the starchy higher glycemic carbs a couple days a week. So I had potatoes. Um, I'm like, well, I can end up and make a baked potato. I can make a mix of root vegetables because I had some carrots and potato and stuff. Perfect, right? So I didn't need to buy any. Um, there were a few things that I did have to buy as far as the lower glycemic ones, but that's just kind of, again, going through ditching these processed foods, box foods, seed oil, sugar filled bliss point type foods,
Right.
what do I end up in a need?
Well, and the problem is too that I see is people don't plan, right?
Hmm.
They're just, oh my gosh, I'm hungry. We didn't plan dinner. I'm starving. I got to eat something. And next thing you know, I see a pizza delivery, right, being delivered. And you sit there and think, well, you failed to plan. And when you fail to plan, you plan to fail, fail to plan, the whole adage. My week is already planned out. I know exactly what we're going to have. I mean, I'm going to make, I found this great recipe online for carnivore chicken nuggets, and they're flippin' delicious. Well, the first time I ever made them was before my husband was eating healthy. He flippin' fell in love with these things. They're so good. Pork rinds. It's
Hmm.
ground chicken and pork rinds. Like, it is so simple, and you form and an egg, and you form like the patty in it, like you mash it down, and then you cook it in the oven or the toaster oven or whatever it is. Um, we're having that this week. We're having Italian beef this week. Now I got to run to the grocery store tomorrow because I need to add some mushrooms to mine. So I'm going to saute up a bunch of mushrooms and have it with my Italian beef bowl. So it's already in the plan, and we're several nights away, that I know exactly what we're going to eat. I had somebody tell me too that, oh, well, I can't eat eggs. Apparently, years ago, she had the test to see what you're allergic to. Eggs was one of them. Still holds true, she says. And I looked at her and I said, you don't have to have eggs for breakfast.
That's just I prepped bacon and sausage. Sometimes I'll eat yogurt and an avocado with it. I'll have bacon and yogurt or bacon and an avocado. I
Yeah,
rarely or occasionally,
yeah,
I should say, will end up and have eggs, but yeah, you don't have to have eggs for
no,
breakfast.
right, right. So it everything goes hand in hand with what we're talking about with the scale and working on things. And I see April said, I think especially for women, we have a lot of mind gut disconnection issues. It's the trigger for so many things. That's huge.
Yep. For a lot of people, they end up and they have this disconnect, and that's where it's really hard. Well, so it's hard for them, and that is, yes, where having an idea, right? But not being very strict with the macros or being strict with the measurements
Yeah,
and that side of it, right? Because that can kind of, especially again in someone with an eating disorder where they overeat or they have these binge patterns, having a tentative guide, right? And that's where I don't think I've ever put the post up in regards of where I know we talked about it one night, but a lot of times I'll use my hand because we all go places with our hands, right? We don't
yeah,
always travel with a food scale.
yep,
Um, and so I've given people that idea of, if you're going to end up and have protein, either have it, at least the size of your palm, if not your whole hand.
right.
Um, if you're going to, have your carbs, depending whether it's a starchy carb or whether low glycemic, and how to measure that and going that route. Because
Yeah,
it's so hard to know, am I full, right? And a lot of times we push so far beyond that where if you leave a couple bites, that's another technique that you can use is sit down with your meal, but start leaving a couple bites left on your
yeah,
plate. Don't, be part of the clean your plate club every meal of the day. Leave a couple
right.
extra bites.
Okay,
And
so I have my purse and I'm pulling out. I don't go anywhere without having a safety net. I am never going to get caught without something. And I hear people saying that, oh, well, we would. No, I just pulled out three, four, five pouches of, let's see,
It's blurred. Yeah.
the carnivore crumbs. They're grass-fed beef. This is for 2 servings, 70 calories, no carbs, 9 grams of protein. It's in my purse. I also carry the Power Pucks, the Super Chews. This is 100 calories and it has 25 grams of protein. These are all stuffed in my purse. These are always available. A lot of times I'll throw chomps in here. I'm not going to get caught where I'm hungry, right? And I don't have anything. And now I'm going to succumb to whatever it is that's around me, or I'm end up going, off the rails because I'm prepared.
Yeah. And that's where, many times as people end up and work on this, yes, being able to have that backup plan, right? If this, then that, right? If you get stuck out on the property, then you have that.
Right.
But when we really look at how our body ends up and gains that energy, right? Because most of the time, why do we eat? We're either tired, we're emotional, angry, happy, sad. I mean, think about it. Anytime that, if someone passes, you take food to the family. If someone is happy or they've hit a promotion, we end up on, we celebrate, right? And typically we have food. If we are by ourselves and we're sitting on the couch watching a movie, we get lonely, we eat, right? So there's many times our health or our habits are tied to some other part, and so really looking at, am I sitting on the couch watching, TV and chilling at 10:30 at night and my body's really tired and I just need to go to bed? Or, am I maybe too sedentary during the day? Do I need to get up and move instead of grabbing that next, sugar hit or candy bar or whatever the case may be that you're grabbing in the middle of the afternoon because you're feeling hangry?
Right.
So
These are just tips that we're giving that we have found work for us and our clients as well. Yeah, I mean, I don't eat anything. I try to eat. Well, you always laugh at me because we're eating about 4:30, 5 o'clock, 5:30. But I've gotten into that habit because I want, I want some good amount of time before. I mean, my body knows it's time for bed around 9:30. Like it is going, we're done. But that's because I get the morning, right? The sunrise, the sunlight. I get the vitamin D. I see the sunset in a few minutes. When we're done here, I'm going to go out and I'm going to watch that sunset without these on.
Mhm.
And it's signaling to my body. My body knows when it's tired and it's ready to shut down instead of hunger. But I had to learn all that too down this whole healing journey as well. Because again, like you said, I'm sitting here watching TV and I want to snack on something. So what would I have snacked on before? I don't know, candy bar, like you said, nuts, like the whole can of nuts, or potato chips, or giant bag of microwave popcorn. Like it was mindless eating on what I did, and I was never really hungry. It was just something to do, to watch TV. So, it was breaking habits. It was things like that. I know you did the same thing with that mindless,
Yep.
I think you said that your thing was like, what was it? Sunflower seeds.
Yeah.
And you can OD on them to this day. If right? Like if we gave Becky like one of the big bags of sunflower seeds, we would have to probably claw it back because she would, but she knows that about sunflower seeds.
Yep. I could eat them until I would have literally sores on my cheek from the salt. So yeah, it's one of those cases where, but if we provide our body with what it needs, it has the ability to rebuild. It has the ability to reset. Like I said before, sometimes that's stepping back. Sometimes that's, you know, increasing what you're doing. The body is smart. It hasn't failed you.
Mm-mm.
There is no this don't work, so, waiting for that next shoe to fall of what you're gonna do. It's a
Yeah.
constant progress and a constant journey of working, and all the body wants to do is it wants to feel safe. It's waiting for an environment to feel that safety so that it can repair those hormones. Yes, you have
Mhm.
the ability to repair hormones without needing, the cortisol drinks or the calming potions at night to help you sleep. It just needs a little consistency with
Right.
the routine.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, but it's consistency. It's staying consistent. Am I perfect 24/7? Am I perfect 365 days a year? No. No. I miss times where I don't see the sun, and I miss, like, what was it? A couple weeks ago, something had happened and I was so exhausted. Do you remember that? And I'm like, I knew that I was going to sleep in, and I did. And I slept in something really ridiculous. It was like 9:30, 10 o'clock. Let me tell you, I missed the sunrise that morning. I didn't care because my body knew it needed rest. And so it's just, give yourself some grace. Be careful about the scale, um, food and your body, right? Like, start letting your body give you those cues, those clues, those. If I eat enough during the day, I am never hungry to want a snack at night. If I find I want a snack at night, I think back at what I had to eat during the day, and I can guarantee I didn't eat enough. And that was my body telling me that.
Yep. And like you said, we're not perfect. We're
No.
human. Anyone that ends up and tells you, that they're perfect.
Yeah.
We're just talking about, allow yourself to be present in what you're doing. Allow yourself that patience with what you're doing and the belief that you are worth coming back to health.
Yeah.
Because your body is listening. It's just trying to adapt. It's trying to, you know, move with what you're doing, and you just need to give it the things so that it can fight to begin to align.
Well, and I think we've ignored the signals our body has given us for so long that we don't know what we're hearing.
Yeah.
But,
Yes,
well, that
ma'am.
was our podcast tonight.
Yes, everyone, welcome to a Monday night where we don't always end up and stay 100% on topic of, I mean, we were scales, measurements, and more, but and sometimes we have guests. So make sure that you are constantly checking in. Make sure you're liking, following us on all the social medias. We are on the Facebook, we are on the Instagrams, and of course over here on YouTube and Twitch. So make sure you're following us on those, liking, comment. Let us know also if there's someone you want us to speak to. Like I said, we do have a couple guests coming up over the next month or so. So I'm really excited about those. And yeah.
Most definitely. Well, set the tone for the week. You've got this. Uh, do some affirmations. Look in the mirror and tell yourself that you're doing good. And we have an affirmations journal. If you go on to the BNC community.com, you can actually download the affirmations journal. It's a great place to start. We give you a lot of prompts you can use. You can print it out, hang it on your mirror, and say it to yourself in the mirror. I know it sounds silly, but it's not, because your body does believe what you tell it. And if you tell it negative things, it's going to believe it. So, anyway, with that, I guess we're done for tonight. We have a BNC community meeting here in a few minutes. So if you so are inclined to join the BNC community, what is this one? This is the
Nutrition meeting.
nutrition meeting. Yeah,
Yes. So
there we go.
definitely jump over and join us.
Absolutely. We would love to see you there, and we will see you next week. So have a great rest of your week, everyone. Thanks.
Absolutely. Enjoy it. And remember, your body isn't behind it. It's just the healing is coming and then you're beginning to align. So continue on with alignment